Look, we got to overshoot. We might have to overshoot when we raise rates. So therefore, it's the end of the cycle. At the end of the cycle, you typically have to raise a lot of cash, unless you think that the Fed blinks. Fed has blinked periodically. They realize that they got it wrong. If they don't wait too long and they admit that they got it wrong or they walk things back, then we're fine. Otherwise, David's view's in play. I look at the retail sales number today. It's in the second one in a row that's disappointing. The consumer price index, not so good. So if you do have a slowing and the Fed ignores the slowing and just focuses entirely on things doing better, then I think you're going to have David's view, and we may have seen the peak. I don't want to believe that, but that doesn't matter. It can't be on hope.
You mentioned the retail sales number. Food and drink down 1.8, worst in almost 2 years. Does that make sense to you as a restaurateur?
People are not. There's a tremendous move to not go out.
When did this happen?
What?
We just asked you the same question. Since when?
No, most of the restaurant companies admit that they've had to boost a huge amount of their operation toward takeout. If you look at Grubhub and you see how well that's, so you look at Caviar, which is buried within Square. There's just a move. I mean, we talk about it. We got a new place open up in 2 weeks, and we're just trying to figure out how do you deal with the cost of the dishwasher at $16 an hour, and how do you deal with takeout who doesn't want to drink at the bar? And I think that this is, look, we're one place. We have two places, but it is the microcosm. It's what we see. It's why a Wingstop can be the best acting.
But you don't see it as a reflection of consumer spending as much as just a trend
Change
of
in
people
way.
wanting to be home.
Yes, it's Domino's, it's Netflix, it's the ConAgra will tell you, it's the frozen food aisle, which is millennials like. It's funny. Millennials are the biggest cohort now. They just shifted. They're no longer some ragtag group of gorillas, G-U-E-R. What they are now is the majority, and their tastes are very different, and they don't like to go out unless it's totally experiential. You have something that makes it seem like that you're turning them on. If not, they want a doggy bag. They want it sent to you. And a lot of it is how quickly can they, Chipotle, very worried, how fast can they get that taco to you? This was unbelievable. You never thought about this 5 years ago. Can they get the taco to you faster? And that's the world we're in. And I think people have to recognize that means less liquor sales. Liquor sales are bad right now.
As far as the market goes, Jim, we have B of A to work with today. 60 cents beats by 4.
I love
revenue
the quarter.
Ahead.
I love the quarter, but they and someone's going to say, look, net interest margin has its gain has shrunk again. They are opening a huge number of deposits that are checking deposits. They make a fortune on checking deposits. At the same time, I hate to just keep going back to this end of cycle, but people say, hey, that's great. That's great. That's the peak. That they're not going to get any better. And I keep thinking about all the millennials that they're adding, which is really amazing. We're going to see that from American Express later this week again. Majority cohort in America. They do a lot of fintech with inside. But you have a PayPal that is worth almost half of Bank of America. And Bank of America's got Zelle and it's doing quite well. Doesn't matter. End of cycle. Just have to keep saying that to yourself. End of cycle.
Is that why we saw the relatively poor performance versus the results of J.P. Morgan, Citi, and Wells Fargo on Friday?
Well, Wells Fargo talked a lot about non-bank competition. They did not talk about peak of cycle.
Right.
J.P. Morgan said things are good, but also talked a little bit about, remember, that was the fabled Jamie Dimon being far more cautious than he was just a few weeks ago.
Well, talking about geopolitical concerns rising, at least in his estimation.
Right, and it doesn't, look, they just pulled out of the Saudi conference. This is the kind of thing we just didn't think about. Now, Saudi is not where necessarily. I'm just pointing out that you just have hot areas all over the place. PNC was the big disappointer, only 2% loan growth. I was shocked in that. There was Mike Mayo actually made fun of them on the call. It was kind of like Mike Mayo was kind of like how I used to treat my kids when they were like 9.
Actually, the loan growth for the 4 we've gotten is 2. The year ago quarter 2.9. Year ago quarter before that 4+.
Well, that's what we're talking about. That's the end of cycle. But on top of that, obviously, Jay Powell knows far more than everybody in business because he is the Fed chief, and he's basically saying, listen, pay no attention to these slowing numbers. Things are only going to get slower, and then we're going to whip inflation now. They are going to burn down the village, but they will save it with that strategy.
And you are being, we should point out, somewhat sarcastic.
I don't like what's happening.
be picking that up there, but you
No,
clearly
that's true,
don't.
especially at 9 o'clock,
Yeah.
which 6 o'clock in the West.
Sometimes.
I do feel that when I went over the Citicorp's quarter was the best so far. Why? Because Citicorp is 50% overseas, and they're doing very well, and they're buying back a gigantic amount of stock. But these banks are kind of just they're laying on the market, and JP Morgan opens at 110 and reverses. I think JP Morgan's going to go back to 110. I was going over that quarter with them aggressively. I think that quarter wasn't nearly as bad, but 110 is still radically below where it was.
All right,
End of cycle. End of days, David.